Hi, my name is Deja Stokes and I'm from Period 6. So today I will be talking about my growth throughout the first quarter. So there are three major things that I noticed throughout the quarter. So one is patience, close reading, and imagination. So at the beginning of the quarter, I was a decent reader, but I never knew how to effectively read a text. I was always used to reading a text and criticizing the author or talking about how they persuaded an audience and their rhetorical techniques that they use. In the past, I would mostly just read a book to comprehend it, but I never really learned anything from the author. So during Brave New World, I mainly relied on my old habits and goals about a reading assignment to just finish. And so I noticed that my weakness while reading Brave New World was that I didn't take time to reflect on the analytical component of the story, and I didn't have patience, and I didn't closely read the text, and I didn't really have a lot of imagination while reading. So, but I did learn while reading Brave New World that a satire can be used as a political commentary. So that was something that I learned from the story. But overall, I learned that I needed to have patience while reading a story so I can try to digest everything that the author was talking about, and it's important to closely read so I don't miss a major topic or subject or conversation. And it's also important to have imagination while reading so I can um, just imagine all that the author is trying to convey. So, a major teacher for me during this quarter was Nabokov. I felt like he introduced me to a lot of distinct techniques that I should use while reading a story. The main thing that I learned was that a good reader must read with imagination and the appreciation for art, meanwhile remaining aloof to the characters. Um, because it's while remaining aloof, it's important to not be too connected to the characters, or else you'll just be confused by what the author is trying to say because you're just focused on how you can relate to the character as opposed to what the author is trying to say. So I really enjoyed that. And so I learned that it's important to fully comprehend, appreciate, and learn from the author. And I recognized that in the past, from Nabokov, I recognized that in the past I would just read a story and try to connect with something in order to enjoy the text, as opposed to learning from the characters and the author and their message. So another author that taught me a lot this quarter was Prose, and I felt like she she highlighted the importance of closely reading a story. Um, an interesting point that Prose made was that it's important to read a text the same way that you learn to write, lingering on every word, every phrase, and reflecting on it so you can really understand the bigger picture of the story. So I learned that the practice of closely reading, and I felt like I could analyze and dissect every word that the author was saying and the overall message and thesis of the storyline. Lastly, close reading allowed me to understand character and plot development throughout the whole book, as opposed to what I understood or what I interpreted from just the few words that I understood. While reading Beowulf, I thoroughly enjoyed and understood the text, um, and while reading, I made sure to practice closely reading and to have patience and imagination while reading so I could um, just utilize what Prose and Nabokov taught, meanwhile appreciating the author and their art. So while reading Beowulf, I made sure to remain patient and understand each word that the author was saying. And I tried to have imagination so I could try to get the bigger picture of what the author was trying to convey. And and by closely reading Beowulf, I could engage my communication with the plot and thesis of the story. And another important technique or habit that I formed over the quarter was that I took notes. In the past, I never took notes on my while reading a story, and I felt like taking notes helped me to interpret the story in a different way and to analyze what I was thinking, how I interpreted the text, what the author's perspective was, and through that, over time I can look back and see what I learned and how I grew as a writer, as well as my initial thoughts of a story. So the next two stories that we read were The Partner's Tale. So I learned that it's important to read the prologue because the author, he used the prologue as a basis for the main component of the character's description. So I liked that reading the prologue or reading any background information on the author and the story helped me to digest the main plot and the characters, so I could get a full understanding of where they were coming from, their perspective, and the story that they were telling. So something that I practiced while reading The Partner's Tale was imagination, because The Partner's Tale had a lot of analogies and a lot of hidden stories that provided evidence for his character. So I liked that by using my imagination, I can still remember all of the main points that I learned about him, meanwhile learning about more characters and drawing them all together to understand what the author meant when he wrote The Partner. And so I liked that I also was able to take notes throughout the story so I can just track my thoughts on what I thought of each character and how they all related to each other. Lastly, while reading The Partner's Tale, I found it hard to comprehend the text, but I liked how the author used a background story. So The Partner's Tale was about Satan's fall from heaven, so I liked that the author used the Bible as a reference, so I could go back and forth and understand how one story correlated to another. So that was something that draws on how it helps to do further research on a story before you read it, so I can connect different things to the story and I can understand and I can learn from the author's perspective on how two stories can correlate and how they can strengthen one character. And so closely reading also helps me while reading The Paradise Lost, because since it was hard to comprehend, since if I were to closely read each phrase, each word, every sentence, then I could learn and I can understand what the whole story is about. And another thing that also helped me to grow as a reader was to discuss the stories with my peers. So if I found a text hard to understand, I can discuss it with my peers and I can learn from their perspective and I can share my perspective and I can get a bigger picture or another outlook on what they thought, on how other people interpreted the story. So I felt like discussing all these stories really helped me understand better, because it wasn't just my perspective, it was other people's. And so mainly that is how I grew as a reader this quarter, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.